Well, good morning, and welcome everybody to the Atlantic Council, and having the fortitude to come for a 3-hour conference on European energy issues. And today, what we'll be doing is that we'll be addressing the intricacies of European Union law. And assessing the legal, political, and geopolitical implications of the European Energy Union. And so we're going to be having two panels this morning. The first one addressing what's happening in the EU now from the standpoint of the Energy Union and European law, and that includes the third energy package. It includes competition laws, which is going to be has gotten a lot of attention lately given the Google case, and will get even more looking forward to tomorrow when the case would be brought against Gazprom. And then in the second panel, get into some of the geopolitical issues. The first panel, which will be moderated by Annie Medaglia, who's the deputy director, will include some true experts in the area. Philip Lowe, who's been the former Director General of Competition at the Commission, and then Energy and any number of things before that, is really an icon in Europe at this point on these kinds of issues. And he will be the first to speak on the first panel. Dr. Alan Riley, also a real expert, is a professor at the City University, London, and specializing in the energy sector and competition law. He's a non-resident senior fellow here at the Council, and he will be speaking. Then Fabrice Verret, who's the head of Transport, Energy, and Environment at the EU delegation here in Washington, and then me. There are bios, so I don't think I need to get more into what their credentials are, but really we have some sensational people here for that panel. And then the second panel will be moderated by David Karani, who's the director of the Eurasian Energy Futures Initiative here at the Council. And the panelists, again, I know you know many of them. Ed Chow, who's a senior fellow in the Energy and National Security Program at CSIS and has over 30 years experience in the energy industry. And has specialized in this part of the world. Bud Coote, who is now a non-resident senior fellow at our Global Energy Center and at the Council. He's had 4 decades of experience as a senior energy analyst at the CIA. He's been a briefer of presidents. He's won all sorts of awards. There's I guess a Langer Award, which is for exceptional service given by the director, and this has been his life, literally, for the last 40 years. John Roberts, again, one of Europe's leading energy security specialists, also a non-resident senior fellow here. John, I'm sure most of you know, has been a noted journalist and expert in this region. And finally, Dr. Brenda Schaefer, who's also a non-resident senior fellow at the center. She's a visiting professor at Georgetown, professor at Haifa. Where are you, Brenda? Over Haifa University in Israel, and she's focusing with us on global energy markets, the Eastern Med, and overall energy security issues. So we welcome all of them. For the audience and those watching the live webcast, you can also contribute to the conversation on Twitter by utilizing hashtag AC Energy. I am going to stop there. We've been looking forward to this session for a long time, and I will turn it over to the panel, and I'll save whatever comments, substantive comments I have for later. So we'll start with Philip.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dick. Thank you, Atlantic Council, for getting so many experts over the Atlantic here to speak and talk to you and discuss these issues. I'm not certain that a poll of the European population would find a great percentage of our citizens actually aware of what the third package is. So to have actually 70 or 80 people in Washington being able to talk about it is a major breakthrough for European Union culture. And I want to start off by saying that the third package does not have its origin in security issues. It began in the 1990s in terms of a program of liberalization in the wake of the decision to create a single market in goods and services. And there was a strong force of opinion which said that if we could actually create a similar single market in energy, particularly in gas and electricity in Europe, there would be substantial advantages in terms of opening up to competition and, of course, subsidiarily to the benefits in terms of choice and security of supply, but primarily an issue about opening up markets, national markets. And that was in the background of a relatively heavily concentrated situation on most markets in Europe, in fact, if not all at that time. There were public or recently privatized monopolies, vertically integrated, virtually impossible to imagine how anyone was going to get into the market if they wanted to sell gas or electricity easily, because the people who actually owned the networks were the very people who were actually putting electricity or gas into them. And as far as gas is concerned, there was a parallel situation in which the major incumbents in terms of distribution of gas in all our countries were buying gas on a long-term basis exclusively to cover the entire volume of demand in their countries, with some well-known companies and countries, in particular Algeria, Norway, and the Russian Federation and their appropriate suppliers. So you can imagine there was no particular consensus in the boardrooms of energy utility companies at the time for opening up their markets, and no disruptive element either. And the disruptive element I would refer to today is climate change, where there is a desire for new entrants providing new technologies, which was not the case when the first package was actually conceived of. And the first package of energy liberalization in Europe was pretty modest. It basically said, well, wouldn't it be good if these companies could actually distinguish inside their own balance sheets which part is transmission and which part is generation? And there was a mention of third-party access, about commitment to allow third-party access to networks, but very little of substance there. And the second package, because there was a second package before the third package, was a little bit better, because it said that it should be legal separation of the transmission systems operators from the suppliers of the commodities, and that there must be provisions for non-discriminatory access, third-party access, and provisions such as use it or lose it, i.e., you shouldn't be able to use a pipeline or a grid and reserve capacity on it indefinitely. If you're not going to use it, you should leave it open to be auctioned for others. Now, those provisions actually are more or less what I think most people think what the Russian Federation and the Ukrainian Federation objected to. Ukraine objected to recently on the third package. In fact, those basic provisions were in the second package. So let's be clear, we're talking about a process of liberalization which has been going on for some time and which has met a number of obstacles. And the most obvious thing in 2004 and 2005, when we were looking at the energy market from a competition point of view, was, well, there doesn't seem to be any competition in this market. And the word consumer was like light to a vampire for most energy companies, because it was all supply side. It was all about government intervention, or alternatively, the power of the companies themselves. Therefore, whatever solutions were there had to be more radical. And there could be two ways of tackling it from a governmental point of view. One was to pursue antitrust cases, and we did against Aon and RWE to break up the networks. But the other was the third package. And basically, the third package, what did it come up with? And I'm going to try to answer Ambassador Morningstar's question, which I understood he asked yesterday about what is a single energy market in Europe, or what is an integrated market. The first thing that the third package says is you've got to unbundle the network or the grid from the upstream suppliers and the downstream distributors. And there was a lot of quite clear negotiation about that, because there were the formalists, the purists, who wanted ownership unbundling. By the way, even in neoliberal Britain, there was never any proposal for ownership unbundling at the beginning. It was the companies themselves who eventually wanted it. But the second formula was, well, okay, you can still own transmission and network companies, but you should also you should have sufficient safeguards around it that they are managed and invested in independently from the upstream suppliers to guarantee that non-discriminatory access, the lack of self-interest of any upstream supplier to restrict the use of the networks. And the second aspect of creating a single market, or an integrated market in Europe, and of course, if any market is functioning, it never functions to 100% well. You've still got companies who are going to be misbehaving. I can mention a few US companies, if you like, as former Director General of Competition, but I'll just limit myself to European examples. Well, watch this space. And by the way, whatever I say today, excuse me, I have forgot to say that, only reflects my personal opinion and does not bind in any way the European Commission or the UK Competition Authority, which I sit on as a board member. So friends, countrymen, journalists, no quotation from me except in a personal capacity, because otherwise I shall be even more dead than I was before. Well, making the markets work, opening up markets for new entrants, including, by the way, by the time the third package was adopted, which was in 2009, the desire to see a lot more new renewable sources of energy used in the networks led to the adoption of these unbundling rules, and alongside that, legislation to allow people to trade and invest freely across borders in electricity and gas. And that is not easy, whether you're in the US or in the European Union. There are a lot of codes covering the way you use networks for allocating capacity, for balancing supply and demand. And they're quite complicated for electricity. They're as complicated for gas. And the legislation of the third package basically puts forward a process by which these network codes can be adopted. Some of them have already been adopted now. This is 2015, but there are a lot of others which still remain to be adopted. And when most of them have been adopted, 96 of the 100 systems operators in Europe now are certified as unbundled, by the way. One could say one's moving towards an open, integrated market. So with separate management of the networks from generation and distribution. And there was a lot of other provisions in the legislation to give independence to national regulators, and we also created a new agency to coordinate the activities of national regulators so that there was more attention paid to the European dimension, although that agency is not a European agency as such. It's an agency for coordination of the national regulators. Now, finally, in the third package, and because I was asked to just to remind you of what's in it, by the time we get to 2009, the word consumer does in fact appear on the radar screen. And there's a lot of text in the third package about giving consumers the best information possible to make good choices about how to reduce their energy bills and make better use of smart technology. And on external agreements, there was at least the aspiration in the agreements of the third package that no member state could undermine the single market by conducting unilateral negotiations with a third party without there being a third country, without there being an agreement between that third country and the European Union. Now, I've got to race through the lessons learned. There's been a lot of progress. The wholesale markets in Europe in electricity and gas work well, increasingly. More than 50% of gas is now traded at hubs, and a somewhat lower percentage, but a very significant percentage of electricity is traded in power exchanges. The price of wholesale electricity and gas has actually been contained compared with the increase in inputs. For example, 17 of our electricity markets are already coupled in the sense of developing price convergence. In gas, you find very little gas now, which is going from a high-priced market to a low-priced market. That sounds like a tremendous achievement. It is for the European Union. But this is making markets work. This is what an effectively functioning market should look like. And there has been a lot of successful work on the network codes to make it effective, but this process is very slow, and there's continued resistance of some suppliers to independent management of the networks. As Ambassador knows, we've had a lot of difficulty in the Baltic countries, and with some of the other lines, the gas pipelines in Eastern Europe, in convincing those who own the lines, and you don't need to guess who, that they have to give up their management and investment in these pipelines unless they have already the full agreement of the governments and the European Commission. And there's still a lot of obstacles to physical and reverse flow of gas. You can imagine that if you have a market in which all of the gas flowed from east to west, a really good thing from the point of market functioning is to get it to flow the other way sometimes when you need it. Now, that's happened with the Ukraine. Some progress has been made in terms of physical reverse flow from Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia, but there's still a long way to go. And the next thing I want to say is that the third package concentrated on access to networks. It didn't address the key issues of how you create the right signals to investment in electricity generation, and indeed in system adequacy. I repeat, the third package is not about security. It's about access to markets, about market functioning. And so there were, of course, voices at the time, I think Alan will remember them, those who said, well, don't worry about security of supply. If you have an effective liquid spot market, there's no problem, because you can always go to the market. But unfortunately, that is not the case, or at least not perceived to be the case. And the temptation of governments to go back into the market in order to ensure that the lights don't go out is very, very strong indeed. In fact, there's a lot of debate about creation of so-called capacity mechanisms, well known here in the US, by the way, in that same direction. And then, of course, if you want to have a coordinated system of energy in Europe, in particular electricity, you've got to have coordination between the TSOs, between the citizens operators of all the countries. And frankly, that level of cooperation is not as high in electricity as it is in gas. In fact, it's nowhere in electricity. It's somewhere in gas, because we have not just the third package, but we have a piece of legislation on security of supply of gas. And then, just to go on with the moans, infrastructure development. It's all very well talking about the legislation and network codes, but frankly speaking, a market's only going to work if you're dealing with a physical commodity, if you have physical interconnection. And the level of interconnection in Europe is still very, very low in many, many areas, and there are some extremely difficult problems to resolve, particularly for the energy islands of the Baltics and the Iberian Peninsula. Now, I don't want to, I'm going to skip some of the moans and groans about the consumer end, because the consumer has still not been able to wake up to markets, to the way markets could work effectively in energy in Europe. It's starting, but it's been extremely painful, partly because in the area of energy, there's a lot of consumer inertia in relation even to the information which is available to consumers. That even when they know that they could gain something a little more by switching, they don't. And actually, some of the surveys show that those who did switch actually paid more in the end, because of various dysfunctions in the market. So there's still a lot of dissatisfaction, and one of the reasons for that dissatisfaction is that making a market work nowadays is not just about the commodity, it's about the information which the supplier has and the information the consumer has. And frankly, the suppliers have all the information in our energy markets. In comparison, in negative comparison to the US situation, where the energy services companies helping you to save money, this isn't the case in Europe. What's left to do after the third package? Well, first of all, the package itself has got to be fully implemented. It's still, we're talking about 6 years later, but there's still things to be done. I think an integrated market will exist if the interconnections are there, for the most part, if the legislation is applied and enforced, if the network codes are adopted, if there's sufficient investment in infrastructure, if there is probably new legislation on electricity markets, in particular electricity generation and security of supply. A lot of the need for infrastructure development can be, first of all, better dealt with probably regionally than by looking at it European Union as a whole. And we probably need some more information, more legislation to allow third parties to share consumer data on consumption in the energy sector. As far as state aid and competition laws are concerned, these are an essential part of making the markets work. And a market will be always imperfect because of government interventions or government subsidy from time to time, and also by the behavior of companies. So that's an essential part of this solution. As far as the external side is concerned, the strength of the internal market of Europe is its most important weapon as an external security, energy security policy. And it's by actually enforcing the same rules applying to everyone, whether they're EU-based or non-EU, that we're going to move towards more predictability to business about what makes markets work. And as long as the impression is given that markets work only because governments make them work through their own intervention, the belief in the European single market concept is going to be undermined, and it is certainly undermined from time to time by third country producers. Now, potential contribution of the framework of the Energy Union. The Energy Union is if it is going to be constructive for Europe, must surely provide the political umbrella for a number of the improvements I've referred to, a number of additional initiatives. And I think it has the potential to provide that impetus. There are ideas such as collective purchasing of gas, which go radically against the original concept of the third package, which was to make markets work. And so I don't think, and I actually don't think that idea will ever get off the ground. Although obviously in a market where you have risky, costly, long-term investments, you need to hedge. But usually the market itself provides those answers through business-to-business long-term contracting. So long-term contracting as such in any market is not something which we should regard as anathema. Sometimes those who commented on liberalization in the European Union tended to think that long-term contracts were the origin of the problem. I can't think of any other market in the whole of the economy which doesn't have long-term contracts. But they have to be done competitively, business to business. I think the potential for working together inside the European Union is there. You don't have to be particularly Euro-fanatical either to work out that an energy union is a good thing. It's almost certainly less costly to look at solutions to your energy problems with your neighbors than to pay to look after energy security, the move to climate change, and creating a competitive market on your own. And this applies to every single country in the 28 in the list, but it applies also to some of its neighbors too. Even Norway and Iceland and Switzerland have an interest in building themselves into this concept, which will make progress in terms of a more effectively functioning market, but also will build trust and confidence between the various players. Thank you.
Thank you. Fabrice?
Well, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. First, thank you very much to the Atlantic Council for organizing this event and trying to shed some light on what is happening in the EU regarding energy policy. I think this is very useful. You will not be surprised that as an EU official, I will be starting by saying that this energy union project is a big thing, is a big project, and is probably one of the most important initiatives of the new commission at the beginning of its mandate, and it set out a roadmap for what it's going to do on energy for the next few years. But one interesting thing, I think, having listened to Philippe Lowe, is the fact that Philippe reminded us very, very clearly that the main drivers of the previous energy packages were market integration and liberalization. And these drivers are still here, that the context has evolved significantly. And the energy union, in fact, is a response to an invitation by a call from the European Council last year, which set out a strategic agenda for the Union. And among the 5 priorities that it set out was the one of building a secure energy and climate future. So we see that even though market considerations are still here, all the drivers are coming to the fore. In the first place, energy security and climate change. And what the European Council in June asked to do was to build an energy union aiming at affordable, secure, and sustainable energy. So the security aspect, the sustainability aspect are strongly affirmed there. This priority has been fully embraced by the new Commission President Juncker, and I think in his first few statements upon appointment, he underlined that he wanted to build this new energy union, and I quote him, to pool resources, combine infrastructures, unite the EU negotiating power, diversify resources, and reduce energy dependency. So the Energy Union strategy framework that was released by the European Commission at the end of February sets the vision for the future and is the way forward to attain these objectives. The Energy Union is still, it's still, I think, something that is very consistent with what has been done before. It's not a sea change in terms of how the EU approaches energy policy. It does not tell member states how they should conduct their national energy policy. It doesn't tell member states how they should exploit energy sources, what the energy mix should be, what the structure of their supply should be. It doesn't seek to a formal rebalancing of power and respective roles of the EU and the member state. What it tries to do is to fulfill something which I think is also which is a new development that has happened after the third energy package, and something new that has happened since the third energy package is that we had a new treaty called the Lisbon Treaty, which for the first time included a chapter on energy. And this energy union framework strategy, in a way, is a first attempt to fulfill the potential of a treaty energy chapter as set out in the Lisbon Treaty. So namely, this is about ensuring the functioning of the energy market, ensuring security of supply, promote energy efficiency and renewables, promote interconnections. So these are the specific objectives set out in the treaty, and I think this is what this energy union is trying to do, precisely realize the full potential of these objectives. And at the same time, what it tries to do, and this is maybe also a little bit of a novelty, is to give substance to a new principle which was also injected in the Treaty of Lisbon, that is this legally perhaps unclear principle of solidarity. And I think the energy union is also about solidarity, about making member states work more collaboratively and have more joined up policies to address energy challenges. So maybe what I would like to try to show is what make this new energy union strategy, framework strategy, a little bit different from what former policies were, and in which way it constitutes a new step forward in Europe's policy on energy. I think the first things I would like maybe to highlight is the comprehensiveness of the approach. This energy union is, I think, has a broader scope than former energy packages. It looks at energy security. It looks at of course, still the the completion of the internal market. It looks at efficiency and demand moderation. It looks at decarbonization. It looks at research, innovation, and competitiveness. So it's a very broad scope for this approach. It also recognizes I think, quite clearly the horizontal nature of energy policy, the role that energy has to play in environment, in transport policy, in foreign policy, in competition, in economic growth. So I think this has been described, I think, by the Vice President for Energy Union as a holistic approach. So that's I think this is the new, maybe a new character of the Energy Union compared with previous policies. I would like to highlight, though, that even if it's very broad in scope, it's not just aspirational goals and declarations of principles. What also characterizes this Energy Union framework strategy is that it is very concrete. It's result-oriented. It comes with a set of action points and a roadmap to realize these action points with more than 40 specific initiatives to be taken over time. So it's very concrete at the same time. It builds on existing measures or initiatives, the third energy package, as we've already mentioned, but also the last year's European energy security strategy, and of course it builds also and integrates in a way the climate and energy packages that have been adopted over the years, the 2020 one, but also the 2030 climate energy package adopted last October. So it builds on all that and it integrates this together, but also it expands further. It looks into issues like developing an LNG strategy for Europe. It looks into the issue of more transparency for intergovernmental agreements. There is also a lot of new things regarding funding mechanism to develop infrastructure in Europe, in particular through the European Fund for Strategic Investment that is being prepared and that should come into force in the summer. So the Energy Union Framework Strategy represents a holistic, cohesive, and common approach to address common energy challenges in all their dimensions. As I said, a lot of it comes with a 15-point action plan, which translates in more than 40 initiatives. It's not my intention to review these action points or initiatives, but I would like to highlight a few priorities. And in doing this, I would like to focus on 3 words, basically, that are like silver lines that goes across the framework strategy published in February. The first word is diversification, and maybe I would like to start with some figures on gas in this regard. The EU uses roughly 450 BCM of gas a year, but its import capacity is close to 600 BCM a year. By 2030, assuming that we reach our climate targets set out in the 2030 package, that is 27% renewable share and energy efficiency, the EU will use less gas than it is using today. It will need something between 350 and 415 BCM. So it's not the Energy Union is not about expanding the infrastructure to be able to import more gas. It's really about diversification, about diversifying sources to increase energy security. And this is why there is so much emphasis put on the Southern Corridor development. That has been a priority for some time. That is still a high priority. And we've seen recent progress on TANAP with shareholders agreement recently signed. This is why we are intensifying our dialogue on energy with important partners like Turkey, with whom we are launching an energy dialogue. And the Vice President was there, I think, in March, and there will be a formal energy dialogue in July, I guess. The Commissioner for Energy is also going to go to Algeria very soon, and Algeria has certainly an important role to play in fostering the EU's energy security. And then I mentioned this also earlier. Another aspect of diversification will be the work that will be put in designing an LNG strategy, and a study is already ongoing to assess existing capacity in infrastructure, in transport, in storage, in import of LNG, and the current and future needs regarding LNG. And there will probably be some legislation that will be tabled in this regard in the beginning of next year. The second key word I like to underline is interconnection. There will be no integrated European market, no secure and resilient energy market in Europe without better interconnection in gas and in electricity, and this is, I think, a very strong focus of the Energy Union. Regarding electricity, it's not a coincidence that alongside the framework strategy for the Energy Union, the Commission has released a specific communication on achieving 10% electricity interconnection target, which we have set for 2020. This is needed to strengthen the resilience of the European energy system, to realize savings, to give more choice to consumers, and to better integrate renewable in the grid. This communication on interconnection comes also with a series of projects that are in the pipeline. And what I perhaps would like just to highlight in 2 words is the progress that has recently been made in this regard in improving the interconnection between France and the Iberian Peninsula, with a new line that has been opened across the Pyrenees in February, and another couple of lines foreseen across the Pyrenees in the future, and also work ongoing to develop a connection through the Bay of Biscay. There's been progress in connecting Malta with Italy, and there's also progress in the North Sea and in connecting Finland and Estonia. So this is a strong interconnection is really very high on the list of priorities, and already progress is being made on these issues just 1 or 2 months after the Energy Union strategy has been published. Same can be true can be said on gas. You know that a number of member states are dependent on a single supplier. One objective that we are trying to pursue with Energy Union is to make sure that in the short term, each member state will have a choice between 3 different gas sources. So, and in this regard, again, interconnections are a key element. Working groups have been established to discuss these interconnection issues at a sub-regional level in Europe. I think it's fair to say that a degree of priority has been placed on Central and Southeastern Europe. A high-level group has been established, has met already in February, and will meet again in July to adopt an action plan that will identify and commit the countries to a limited number of priority infrastructures that will deliver on market integration and supply diversification. So this is something on which the Commission is very, very active and try to make countries work together to improve interconnection, gas interconnection. So with this emphasis on Central and Southeastern Europe, but also work going on the Iberian Peninsula and the Baltic region as well. The third word I would like to highlight is decarbonization. Environmental aspects I've always been a strong catalyst for energy integration, and it's an ambitious climate change policy is clearly part and parcel of the energy union. And I will just highlight very, very quickly the main areas where work is ongoing in this regard. As you know, we are in the final step of agreeing on market stability reserve for the ETS, and this is hopefully going to be agreed by the Parliament and Council before summer. This will pave the way for a new ETS directive that will probably be tabled at the beginning of next year. And there will be also a new effort-sharing decision for the non-ETS sector that will be tabled in 2016 in order to translate at national level the overall objective of cutting emissions by 40% in 2030. There is also work to put together a new renewable energy package, as well as a package of efficiency measures, in particular in the building sector and the transport sector. So this is, I think, all I wanted to say about the energy union at this stage. It's a quick overview, as I've only skimmed the surface of things. And to conclude, I would just say that it's good to have a strategy, but it doesn't really, it's useful only if there is a buy-in by the stakeholders. And I think that it is fair to say that we are in a context where there is strong buy-in by the stakeholders, be it the member states or the industry. We have, I think, a good alignment of policy prioritization by the Commission, the geopolitical circumstances, and the international agenda with COP21 just around the corner. And this creates a situation that is conducive to making this energy union work.
Thank you. Alan?
Right, okay, I'm going to be critical and brief. So essentially what I'm going to say is this. I think the problem with the energy union is that it's an incredibly broad canvas that has been painted. And you need to have some focus about where we're going to start. And the most important immediate supply security issue are the countries of Central Eastern Europe, the Baltic states, and Finland in relation to gas. And it is there I argue that we have to start and prioritize there. There's a danger otherwise of going in all sorts of different directions. I also disagree with the argument that we're not going to increase the size of the gas market. It seems to me that this is an opportunity to get a significant decarbonisation advantage. I mean, one of the problems with European climate change policy so far is it has rather spectacularly failed. It has actually created a structure which encourages greater use of coal. The Germans, I think, are building 8 gigawatts of coal-fired capacity. So the idea of creating a stronger, more integrated European gas market in which you can actually move more gas around, actually encourage more gas to come into the system and push out coal is a good thing. Now, if you're going to focus on Central and Eastern Europe and the Baltic states, one of the major issues you've got to deal with is putting in a lot of the interconnectors and making sure the third energy package is applied in those areas. There are a number of problems, and I'm just going to briefly list them. One of them is the principal problem is not Russia. The principal problem is incumbent utilities who actually don't like liberalisation. Liberalisation is a bad thing because it reduces their profits. That's what liberalisation is kind of supposed to do. It's supposed to bring in competition. So that's one of the really major issues of dealing with that. Then there's the Russians. Then there's the difficulty of non-economic interconnect. So even if there's EU funds, they're usually only partial, and especially these poorer states in Central and Eastern Europe have difficulty funding them. Then you've got all the environmental planning issues to get the interconnectors in place. And then you've got the disputes. One of the location disputes, one of the craziest is in relation to Estonia and Finland, where you've got a potential LNG terminal, which the EU would fund, but they have to decide where it goes. And neither Estonia nor Finland can get their act together. So there are a whole range of problems there which we need to focus on. I mean, one of the arguments I've got in relation to the location disputes, it's very simple. We should have a regulation which imposes compulsory arbitration after a period on this, because these disputes have been going on. Well, that particular dispute now has been going on for 4 years. Money's been on the table, and nothing has happened. The other issue is in relation to the major utility. What I think is the major problem is actually the utility resistance or energy company resistance. And I think the Commission should consider a second energy sector inquiry to actually go through all of this. So that's a kind of antitrust investigation to reinforce the application of the competition rules and open markets across the Union, because the EU's powers in that area are stronger. My other point is that in the Energy Union proposal, there is a really good argument in terms of strengthening the putative energy regulator, ACER. And that should be done, but the real difficulty is, how on earth do you do that, because the member states resist giving any more powers to the regulator? Now, some states may be prepared to do so. A lot of states, my own member state, of course, would find that somewhat difficult. But if you actually get DG Comp engaged in a new sector inquiry and just make a damned nuisance of yourself, where the prospect of DG Comp stamping all over the energy companies once again, that actually creates a situation where they come to the conclusion that actually having the European energy regulator might be better than allowing DG Comp to use its antitrust powers. So I think there are ways of doing this, but there are a lot of problems there. But I think what really is required is priority and focus. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Alan. I'll try to be brief as well, so we can get to your questions. First of all, with respect to the energy union, maybe I'll sound too much like a diplomat, which I no longer am. I think, and because I basically agree with a lot of what all of you have been saying, including Alan, I think the energy union probably overall is a good thing. On the other hand, I shouldn't even say on the other hand, I should say I'm not sure that there's really a whole lot new in the energy union, in the sense that I'm not sure there are a whole lot of new ideas. But the good part, I think, is what Fabrice mentioned, that it does provide, hopefully, a political umbrella which brings all the elements together in one package, which hopefully then makes it easier to focus on some of the issues that Alan talked about. Mm-hmm. And that I think the hope for the energy union is that after what's happened in the last year or so in connection with Crimea and eastern Ukraine, that there'll be more political will within the member states to focus on the kinds of issues that Alan talked about. We'll see. I mean, a good example is the infrastructure projects that started off with 244 projects or something like that, now down to 49, and what are going to be the 8 or 10 key projects that really get focused on. So we'll see, but getting it all together into one policy package, and if there is the political will, a lot can be accomplished. But also, I think it's important to say, I think sometimes Europe doesn't get enough credit for everything that it's already done. and Philip talked a lot about the, with respect to the third energy package and a lot of the work that's been done, even going back to 2006, and then the cutoff in 2009, and the different things that have happened since then. That Europe is a much different place today from an energy standpoint than it was back then. I'll give you one, very brief anecdotal example. I wrote a paper back when I was outside of the government the last time, back in 2007, and I was talking about European energy policy, and I made the comment that if you looked at the then European neighborhood policy and then looked at what the neighborhood policy was with respect to Azerbaijan, you go through a whole list of things on several pages, and literally the 14th and last objective, if you even want to call it objective, was working with Azerbaijan on energy issues. I mean, and that does show, in fact, that there has been significant change from 2007 until today. A second comment, and I said I'd be brief. I will, I promise. And I said this yesterday at CSIS. I've said it before. And this goes back to what Philip was talking about. I think, along with implementing the energy union in a meaningful way, that the most important thing that the EU can do, again, looking at it from the outside, is just follow the law. It is so important that the EU consistently follow its own regulations and directives, and I think when the EU does that, it does a couple of things. I think you can't totally separate law and politics, but in dealing with the Russians, for example, if you can point to what the legal issues are rather than getting into a food fight on the political issues, which you're not going to totally avoid, but at the least it can help mitigate it and say, hey, look, this is what the law is. You're just going to have to comply with it. I think personally that was very important on the South Stream issue and the demise of South Stream. I know John and some others may think that I John Roberts laid too much importance in it, but I think the Russians were seeking a political solution on South Stream. They realized they weren't going to get it, and that under the legal regulations it just wasn't going to happen. Plus it costs a lot. But it also has to be applied to everybody, applied to all suppliers, all member states, all utilities within member states, and that any supplier that acts according to the law, including Gazprom, should be able to sell what it can in an open European market. Final point that I will make is, okay, why is the U.S. why are we even having this here? Why should the U.S. care? And when I was the envoy for Eurasian energy, I had to answer that question almost every day. And I noticed that Robin Dunnigan, who's now the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Energy Bureau, very good person, basically was saying the same thing at a session we had last week that I say, that it's important for two reasons. One, strong energy security means a strong economy on both sides of the ocean, and that we have an interest in a strong European economy. Europe has an interest in a strong American economy. And there is a political aspect to it. I didn't say it quite as bluntly when I was in the government, but there are obviously political security issues. We don't want anybody using energy as a weapon, and we need to work together to deal with the geopolitical issues, and I would argue technology issues. Which brings me to the last point, well, the last of 2 points, but one is very brief, and that is, I do think the US-EU Energy Council, which was established back in 2009 when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, is important. Not so much for the reasons that I've heard about in several sessions in the last months. That, we've had, last year there were 2 meetings, and the co-chairs, which is true, the Secretary of State, Secretary of Energy on our side, and the appropriate commissioners on the European side, the Energy Commissioner, the High Representative for External Affairs, and and I guess the Commissioner for Research and Technology. Yeah, those 2 meetings a year are important, I think mostly from a symbolic standpoint and to generate some enthusiasm for cooperation. What was really important when I was the special envoy were the working groups, and to make sure that the working groups operate. We had phone conversations at least twice a month, meetings every couple of months, in which we really developed coordinated, I think, anyway, I thought, coordinated policies with respect to the geopolitical issues, how to deal with Ukraine even back then, how to deal with Russia, so that we both were saying basically the same things, other issues as well. And I think that, you know, I think that really needs to work and continue. And also on the technology side, there really needs to be even more cooperation between, I think, DOE and our national labs and the counterparts in Europe, and working together on technology issues is, I think, critically important. And finally, we need to encourage investment, American investment in Europe. TTIP is important. I know we've gone back and forth between the U.S. and EU whether energy should be part of TTIP. I think we ought to have a session here on that in the not-too-distant future, and to try and talk that through. So I'll stop there and turn it back over to Annie.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm not going to grace you with my voice.
We can go an extra 5 minutes. We can cut into our break.
All right. Well, the boss says so. So, Philip, I don't know if you wanted to respond to Alan's comments at all about. No. Okay. So let's just open it up to the floor for some questions. Do we have? If you could take the mic and then also introduce yourself, that would be wonderful. Yes.
Foundations in town, the Heinrich Böll Foundation. My question is for Fabrice. You talked a lot about the energy union concept from an EU standpoint. My question is more on the dynamics between the member states and what's being discussed on the European Union level, because the energy mixes, energy legislation is usually the jurisdiction of the member states. So I just wanted to ask whether you could say a little bit, maybe also about some of the difficulties in that dynamics going forward and sort of paving the way for the future of the energy union. Thanks.
Well, thank you. As I said, the issues of energy mix and which and exploitation of energy resources remain very much an issue for member states to decide by themselves. So there is not really an effort from the EU to steer which energy source any given country should favor. There is where the EU is putting and the Commission is putting in effort is into promoting regional cooperation, in particular when it comes to infrastructure development and interconnection. And this is one of the reasons why these 4 working groups on the Iberian Peninsula, on Central and Southeastern Europe, on the Baltics, and on the North Sea have been created so that we can put together those countries and look at collaborative and cooperative solutions for the bottlenecks or the gap that exists in these regions. And there is also something called infrastructure forum that has been that will be established. It's a new thing. It's a new forum that will bring together the member states, stakeholders, the EU institutions to also look into infrastructure issue and try to work a bit more in terms of giving priority to which project have to be considered for financing. So this is really in this context that there is an effort to make member states work more closely together.
So Philip, if you want to respond, and then maybe
just
Alan
to add
as
to
well.
what Fabrice said, that notion of sovereignty on exportation of energy resources and energy mix, we've got to look at it fairly realistically for two reasons. First of all, 28 member states of the European Union have agreed emissions targets. And because they've agreed emissions targets, they automatically reduce their margin of maneuver for dealing with the energy mix, because they have to go for non-carbon resources and not carbon resources, notwithstanding the burden sharing between them. Secondly, if you look at the flows of electricity, of mine gas, but just look at electricity across Europe now. They're enormous from one day to the next on the continent of Europe. We have bottlenecks, but in Benelux, Poland, Czechia, Hungary, Germany, Austria, even Italy now, we have flows in both directions according to where the market is producing it, which make our concept of a national energy policy with energy mix a much narrower one. Because really what we're talking about in terms of energy mix is the public consent of our populations for the exportation of a technology of energy on the soil of that country. So it's public acceptance issues, which not government policy, which as such, not a strategy. It's public acceptance issues which absolutely dominate the question, whether it's nuclear in Austria or Germany, or it's onshore wind in England, or other forms. There is almost certainly one technology which our public doesn't accept on their territory. However, when it comes actually to trading in electricity, examining the molecules of, or indeed the whatever neutrons which are crossing the border, is quite difficult. The Austrian Parliament at one time came to me and to Commissioner Oettinger, the previous commissioner, to ask how they could actually control any nuclear energy which passed into the borders of Austria. And my commissioner was in a pretty good mood that day. He said, "Well, I don't know. I suppose we could think of some sort of labeling scheme." All I'm pointing to is that member states themselves consciously, our own governments, our own people, are taking decisions which prejudge that original idea, which was a UK, I think, idea, by the way, in the Lisbon Treaty, of a sovereign energy mix decision. Oh, no. We've already gone way beyond that, because we know that for 2050, in any situation where we believe we're going to meet the decarbonization objectives, we will have at least 60% renewable energy in our system. So that's a major reduction. Then the energy mix decision for a country is basically nuclear or not, or what kind of renewables or not. I've just put it as a contextual question.
Alan, do you want to chime in here?
Well, I think the query I've got on that is that, in principle, that is correct. The difficulty is that our ability the real issue is the renewable technologies which underpin this don't exist, which allow us to actually deliver at scale the renewable sources of energy. I mean, I think it's Dieter Helms, Professor of Energy Economics at Oxford, has this great stat that to create half the electrical power you consumed in the United Kingdom with wind, you would need a wind farm which will be 4 kilometers in depth, and it would have to go around the whole of the United Kingdom. I think it gives you a sense of the impossibility, the scale impossibility, and the expense possibility of doing this. So the targets are there. And that was one of the reasons why I make about the gas market, is that the ability to actually cut CO2 emissions at speed is there and at low cost. I mean, there was a great stat from, there was a paper produced by the Gas Advocacy Forum, and I think McKinsey's did the detailed work. And what it pointed out was that if you simply increase the load factor on gas-fired turbines in Europe, say from 45% to 75%, and you switch off the equivalent amount of coal-fired production, the effect of that will be to cut about 300 million tons of CO2 out of the atmosphere every year, which is about a third of all of CO2 emissions from coal in Europe. And the point about that is you could do that for no capex cost at all. You're just using existing gas-fired turbines. And to do that with renewables will cost you between 80 to 120 billion euro. So, that I think is an illustration of and particularly if you're talking about the Eurozone, which is suffering from extreme austerity. The United Kingdom now, last year, produced more jobs than the whole of the Eurozone. The great county of Yorkshire produced more jobs than France. And you've got a Eurozone under incredible stress and you've got these objectives, which are very, very expensive and I think are actually not deliverable under current technological terms.
Sorry, Alan. I think you can't take things to an extreme.
Yeah.
First of all, technologies are what they are today,
Yeah.
but they're going to be developed.
Of course,
You're optimistic about gas technology. People are entitled to be optimistic about some renewable technologies. All we're saying is that at the moment, the CO2 objectives, emission objectives, reductions are agreed. They're going to be achieved by energy efficiency measures. They're going to be achieved by improvements in gas technology. They're going to be achieved by, nevertheless, by a very substantial contribution from renewable technologies as well. It isn't either or, it's all of the above. And that's what the situation we're faced with.
No, I don't disagree with that in the sense that what I'm saying is the current technologies can't deliver that. And this is my point about prioritization, that why actually the gas, which we can use now to take out heavy inducing CO2 emissions from coal, is where to start. And I think my other critique of the system is that, although to be fair, the Energy Union paper does discuss it, discuss research and innovation, we do need significant more funding of basic research into new renewable technologies in order to actually get anywhere with this. Because what seems to be is that we're actually subsidizing the initial inefficient and limited and expensive renewables, but we're not actually putting enough money into research into the new renewables technologies. And it seems to me that's the way we're going. It is, to my mind, the future is it's R&D into renewable technologies. It's potentially a next generation nuclear, and it's gas is the principal intermediate fuel.
I mean, but the beauty of Europe is that we've got 28 countries with different views about the energy mix.
Yes.
And this is a real opportunity for diversity to let all flowers bloom, to meet the challenge. And that's very good for us.
I think we have time for about 2 more questions. I hope they have this type of debate. So, John? Wait, can you just take the mic so that the online audience can hear you? 1 second.
John Roberts with Methinks and with the Atlantic Council. Basically, it's Philip, but Alan, I'm sure, will kick in on this. Do you think that market forces are actually going to deliver the kind of CO2 emission reductions that we're looking for in Europe, or do you actually think we're going to have to introduce carbon taxation of some kind or another?
Ooh. Well, the US attitude to this is, first of all, to be much more optimistic about technological advance than Europe has been in all areas. And one can say that that is market-driven. Even all the services around making better use of energy are going to be as applicable in the US as they are in the EU, and I think that's that's going to be a challenge in the energy efficiency area, it's a challenge in renewables, it's a challenge in gas technology, it's a challenge in new uses of gas in shipping and transport. All these things will contribute to CO2 reduction. Now, if, however, you're going to get real traction on at a world level on reduction of CO2 emissions, you've got to agree on something which is constraining for the major carbon-producing countries, which is the US, China, India, the EU, and others. And at the moment, the European solution to that, which, as Fabrice mentioned, is the one of concentrating on improving the cap and trade system, the European trade system, is not something which is shared by the other major countries. Whether one can return to a debate about carbon taxation is that's definitely on the table if there is no solution, global solution in COP21 on a cap and trade. But some way or other, the contribution of Europe in physical terms to the solution of the problem of CO2 emissions, in any case, is only marginal, because we account for only 4% of CO2 emissions in 2030. So your question to me, to Alan, is effectively a question to all the carbon-producing countries, and on what basis can we go forward? At the moment, Europe for itself is going forward on the CO2 emissions basis, and with improvements in technology as well, it should be able to get to its target.
Can I just say briefly, I agree with what Philip was saying about the market in the United States, that I think that there are strong believers in the marketplace in the United States on renewable energy, and that costs are coming down a lot faster than people have expected. That it's becoming solar particularly is becoming cost competitive. There are a lot of companies that are involved. One of the biggest, and the subsidies should be, in fact, we have a program, a little quick advertisement program on Friday on these issues, on the future of renewables, how they're going to be financed, what's going to happen with subsidies, and also about the regulatory system. And that's where I think, the biggest problem in the United States is, and I think maybe in Europe as well, how our public utilities, with all of the infrastructure that it has and with how the grid is presently constructed, how are utilities over the next 10 to 20 years going to deal with this kind of distributed generation? But I do think in the United States the market really is developing and a lot faster than people think.
And I agree with Alan fully on what he said earlier about cost-effective renewable technologies, right. Because we produced a paper, the Commission produced a paper 18 months ago, precisely to push people away from subsidizing production to subsidizing research and innovation, and getting away from it.
And I think maybe we should also remember that currently subsidies to fossil fuels are much higher than what they are for renewables. So if talking about subsidies, phasing out of subsidies to fossil fuels, that's something that also should be factored into the equation.
In fact, one of my arguments about what the Energy Union should include at the moment, if you like, my prioritisation, is because of the fall in oil prices. This is a classic opportunity to cut all the fossil fuel subsidies. The other thing I was worth mentioning was a great paper by Ed Morse's team at Citibank entitled "The Energy Revolution Will Not Be Televised," which is definitely worth a read. And one of the points that the hippies at Citibank were making was that if you look at the technological surge in solar, so you're getting not just the price falling, but the actual degree of energy being extracted from the light spectrum by the latest technology. It's not just it's grid parity plus immense efficiency, and also lightness and utilization. And one of their observations is the potential of that, the effect of that in the global south, where you have an immense degree of distributed electricity being able to be rolled out, rather like mobile phones were rolled out to give a huge technological leap for a lot of developing countries. And that could have an immense impact on the actual flow of energy flows from north to south.
Thank you. We have one more. Yes, sir.
Ariel Cohen, Center for Energy and Natural Resources and Geopolitics. Couldn't agree more with the discussion of the necessity to push for R&D and not to focus on subsidization of renewables, particularly the storage issue, because the baseload in renewables is problematic, and you have to store energy and then feed it back and whatnot. So that is a great challenge, both for the U.S. and for the European technological players. But my question is different. My question is on Russia and Turkish Stream. To what extent the third package and the current geopolitical concerns vis-à-vis Ukraine are going to drive the measures that may or may not be taken vis-à-vis Greece and Turkey, Russia, etc., to make sure that the goals of gas sourcing diversification in Europe are front and center on the agenda. I think from the U.S. perspective, as well as from the Central and Eastern European perspective, this is a very important issue, that we don't lose the perspective of the necessity to diversify not just the southern corridor, but other sources, Turkmenistan, eventually Iran, East Med, North Africa, not just focusing on Russia. Thank you.
Philip, Alan.
Go ahead. Shall I have a go? Okay. I think this is, there's a point which I did make yesterday, which I think is perhaps worth making today about TurkStream, is that it's very important to understand the context in which the Turks agreed to go forward with that. In October and November, the amount of gas which was supplied to Turkey through the Balkan network was cut by about 50%. And then the Turks agreed to go forward with TurkStream, and suddenly the gas supplies went back up again. So you have to look at that. You have to look also at the acquisitions of energy infrastructure and assets in Turkey by Russian companies. So what are we looking at here? It seems to me that Turkey is a potentially great market for Russia. It's a market which is growing, a large gas market. 60% of the market is already in Russian hands. If you're facing a situation where you're going to lose parts of the European market and you're losing Ukraine, then the potential for Turkey to become a kind of Russian gas colony is very, very attractive. So I think there are steps being taken in that direction now. What exactly the Turkish reaction will be, I'm not so sure. It seems to be somewhat divided. But it seems that there are possibilities, I think, both for the European Union and the United States to offer support to Turkey to help them cope with, improve their supply diversification and supply security. So I think that's one issue that we have to look at purely in terms of relationship with Turkey. Of course, then there's the next stage of that, which is how on earth you relate that to the supply security in the European Union, particularly in relation to the Southeast Balkans. And I think there are a number of range of issues there. One of them is the pressure to build pipelines from TurkStream into the European system, and the answer to that is we should not do that. But there's going to be immense pressure to do that, and that's going to be used, I think, as a means to try and divide the European Union, Southeast states, and some of the Balkan states, not in the EU, from the European Union. and create tension. I think that's one of the potential there. Now, as for Turk Stream itself, the trouble with it is fundamentally the same as with South Stream. Can you build it? Because you've got US and EU sanctions. Who is going to finance it? Gazprom is going to suffer a very substantial loss of revenue this year. They've also got to build the Power of Siberia. You've got some serious questions about how that's going to work. Who is going to be their partner? Again, because of sanctions, that's very difficult. Eni had to withdraw from South Stream because of the potential impact of sanctions. So all of these questions come up. Are they actually going to build not the Turk Stream they're saying, but a kind of additional Bloom Stream, which is actually another source of additional supply, perhaps another 15 billion cubic meters or so into Turkey, but not the bigger, larger pipeline? And if that is what's really going to happen, like one or two strings. So I think there's some of the kind of, I have answers, but I think there are a whole series of questions which you can start asking about all of this.
Yeah, just to add, I mean, the exemptions given for reservation of third-party access to new pipelines coming into the European Union territory are normally restricted in time. They represent the legitimate need for the investors to pay back the costs of construction pipeline. On the other hand, they also normally take into account the impact of that extra supply, if indeed there is extra supply, on the markets inside the European Union. And if indeed the effect of the increased volume of gas coming through is in fact to strengthen the dominant position of any particular supplier on any national market, if markets hopefully, if markets realistically are still national, and they probably are for the moment until interconnection improves, then one can expect that any proposals which simply result in increasing the dominant position of the Russian suppliers in Bulgaria, Hungary, and Romania will be subject to significant conditions. And it has always, as you imply in the question, there's always, and Fabrice has repeated it, it has always been a key element of our own external policy to diversify sources of supply and not simply routes.
And that goes back to the mantra: follow the law. Then the market will sort it. Then the market will sort itself out.
But I repeat again what I said right at the beginning, that if you want to be credible vis-a-vis external suppliers, you say we play by European rules. Everyone does, inside and outside. No discrimination simply on the basis of the fact that you're foreign.
Exactly.
That's sometimes difficult for some of even our own European colleagues to understand.
Let's call a halt to this panel now. Let's make it only a 10-minute break. Maybe we'll go 5 minutes over at the end, so we have time for the second panel, which gets into all of these geopolitical ramifications. So I'm sure it'll be very interesting. Thank you to the